Hey guys, RC Anime here. If you're a fan of cinema, then at one point or another you've heard of the French New Wave, one of the most important time periods of cinematic history, structuring the way most films work today. However, in anime, no other show or film I've seen shows more direct inspiration from the French New Wave than the Monogatari series, perhaps the quintessence of New Wave influence on anime. Almost every key characteristic of the Nouvelle Vague can be spotted in the backbone of Monogatari. But first, let's start by briefly answering, what is the French New Wave?
On verra bien.
The Nouvelle Vague was a film movement that started in 1950s France, when a group of French filmmakers wanted to break away from old classic Hollywood traditions, telling more personal, unique stories, shooting on tight independent budgets. This would lead to many traits we see in films today, such as auteur theory, shooting on location, hard cuts and editing, voiceovers, and handheld cinematography. Of course, by now, most films have moved on from the original feel of New Wave films. But every now and then, there's always this one film that tries to replicate the period's style. For anime, that's the Monogatari series. But what technique does the Monogatari series take from the French New Wave? Well, first is the breaking of the fourth wall.
Voyez, elle pense qu'à rigoler.
À qui tu parles?
Spectateur.
Back then, French filmmakers like Godard wanted to remind the audience that they were ultimately watching a film. And in order to do so, the characters would occasionally refer to the audience
Elle s'en va.
or the story itself.
Qu'est-ce que c'est dégueulasse?
Other anime have broken the fourth wall before, but none as frequently as the Monogatari series. In almost every arc, the characters would at least once blatantly foreshadow events that would occur in the future.
これから起こる私と荒木さんのエピソードは次回作で露骨に伏線を張らないで
Or joke about how they've fallen out of character.
何よチュララギくん
人の名前を沖縄県の方言みたいに呼ぶな。僕の名前は荒木だ。ってそりゃ八九時の芸風だろうが。
失礼噛みました
Or throw out a flashcard letting the audience know which chapter of the light novel it's about to adapt.
小数が一つ飛んでないかな気のせいかなまあいいや
Like films such as Père Le Fou and Une Femme de Femme, the Monogatari series wanted to let viewers know that they were experiencing an anime, allowing a better suspension of disbelief and giving Monogatari more leeway to experiment. Which brings us to the second element, editing. Ever since Breathless, New Wave films popularized jump cutting in a time where scene transitions were normally only limited to fades and dissolves. And lots of these jump cuts broke the reality of continuity and sometimes physics. In Breathless, we would go from Mikkel talking to himself in a car, then suddenly cut to him on the run from the cops. In Monogatari, there's slightly more sense in its jump cutting, but even then it still breaks up continuity. Like this moment where Akanbaru speaks to Aaragi, after every sentence, we immediately cut from her standing in a completely different spot, signifying her toying with him. Another example of this is in this scene with Senjugohara and Aaragi. While he's looking at her, she's facing away from him. Shinbu then cuts to a close-up of Senjugohara, then to one of Aaragi, back to Senjugohara, then to a long shot that suddenly shows them facing each other, omitting any shot of Senjugohara actually turning to look at Aaragi, making the starting point of their literal face-to-face conversation ambiguous. And sometimes the jump cuts just lead to an unexpected joke. It's thanks to this kind of editing that brings Monogatari's third key element to life, dialogue. Most New Wave films had long-running scenes of just two characters talking about indirect subject matters, a lot of the time reiterating the same points.
À travers les photographies, les reconstitutions.
Especially in Godard films, characters would often have long discussions about certain topics.
Qu'est-ce qu'il faut que je fasse pour que vous soyez sûr que je vous aime?
Which would travel to other unrelated subjects,
T'as une pièce de 20 francs
and quickly bring themselves back to the original topic.
Tout à l'heure, je vous ai posé une question, vous m'avez pas répondu.
Quelle question
Many conversations in Monogatari has this exact same quality. As a series well known for its long-running dialogue, the Monogatari series has a lot of verbal treatment that nods back to the Nouvelle Vague. A lot of its dialogue can stray from one point
恋について語ろうぜ。月日ちゃん。
恋
to another,
これは犬が喋ったくらいの衝撃だよ
早とちりをするな。
or repeat the same issue for 5 to 10 minutes. Of course, like the New Wave films, the anime never lets itself become boring thanks to its playful use of mise-en-scene. Fourth and final is perhaps the most prominent, deviation.
文化祭の出し物何だった？
お化け屋敷と喫茶店。
What made the French New Wave was primarily how it deviated from typical narratives and tested out new and creative ways to tell a story. For example, in Pure Le Fou, one moment has two main characters talking, but instead of showing their faces, we see close-ups of paintings intercut along with their conversation.
Dans le fond, je m'en fous totalement.
Il n'y a pas que ça.
Puisque je te dis que je m'en fous totalement.
Monogatari has this feature as well, like in this moment where Aoyagi speaks to Nadeko on the phone. Instead of seeing Nadeko's face, her responses are personified by a tree in the frame.
今日いきなりってのが都合悪いようなら。
今日以外は全部忙しいくらいだよ。
In Revue Sa Vie, one moment has two characters talk, only to have their lines pop up on screen than having us hear them. Monogatari does something similar, with Hanakawa talking to Aoyagi on the phone, but only letting us see what he says in text, then hear him speak.
お待たせしました。羽川です。
Dialogue isn't the only thing Monogatari deviates with either. As if taking inspiration from Père Le Fou's party scene, the anime tends to change the color scheme of the same locations a lot, with each shift mirroring the changing mood of the scene. The series also enjoys its innuendos as well, showing us one thing to imply something else, something also very common in New Wave films. Having said all of this, I'm not trying to say that the Monogatari series is a mere copy of New Wave tropes, because there's plenty of aspects that make the anime its own special and influential entity. But I think it's important for us to understand where the show is coming from and where it's getting its inspiration, to both respect and appreciate it a little more. Because is every little thing in Monogatari supposed to be symbolic? Not really. The New Wave was never about capitalizing on symbolism. While there was plenty of that, overall it was about exploring filmmaking, finding new ways to tell a story, experimenting, trying to push the medium to its fullest potential. These tricks may not always work, but it's really the dot that counts, because like Coke and penicillin, some of the best things are accidents. And who knows, maybe Monogatari itself might just start a new wave in anime. After all, why do the same thing over and over again, when you can try something new?